All right. Well, we'll get underway. Drama's getting the live stream up, but we'll have some other people joining us here on the Zoom call. I'll get them to turn off the cameras and mute themselves as well. But first up, Shannon, welcome to the show, Awakened Entrepreneur. Really a privilege to connect with you here. For those of you that are watching, Shannon's a transformational coach. He's a leadership expert. He's an author, and he's tends to work with entrepreneurs that are, and correct me if I'm wrong here, sort of 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs, as well as working with some elite coaches as well. And he really does deliver. I've been following you online for quite some time. I'm just going to admit some more people to the room. Admit. So it's really great to have you here today. Before I get into the interview, guys, if you are connecting into the Zoom, if possible, could you please just mute your line and turn your camera off as well. But if you have any questions in the chat, please feel free to comment, to interact. For some reason, I couldn't get the live on Facebook, so we're doing it here in Zoom, and we will post a replay in the group. So Shannon, thanks again for taking the time. For those that are on the call and for listening to the replay, just tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into coaching, and who you're working with at the moment.
Yeah, I've been coaching now for close to 20 years. And I started kind of similar to how when you see a really good movie and you have to share it. I got exposed to personal improvement in my mid-teens, and I was just fascinated by this concept of potentiality, of human potential. And what was the difference? The difference between people who perform and achieve and receive at a high level and people who do not. And how do you bridge the gap? And so some of those questions were just fascinating to me. And I found that coaching was really, in my experience, the best vehicle to experience that transformation from one to the other. So that's a bit of my kind of background of how I got here. And as far as right now, I mostly work with visionary founders of social impact businesses that want to do some type of moonshot level social impact endeavor.
What do you mean by moonshot?
Something that's really big, something that has never been done before.
So you've got the tagline, changing the world by doing the impossible. And I guess what you're saying, that's speaking into that dynamic. So before because I can see the discussions we can go all over the place. What are some of the impossible visions that either past clients, and obviously there may be some non-disclosure stuff, maybe you can or can't name particular clients. What sort of visions are we talking about?
Sure. Some of the ones that I can talk about would be, for example, raising the GDP of New Zealand by raising the GDC, which is gross domestic confidence. The theory was that, per capita in New Zealand, they're some of the most innovative geniuses in the world. The challenge is they invent world-changing technology, and then because of this tall poppy thing, they sit on it, and the technology never gets to see the light of day. So the idea was, well, if we got tech entrepreneurs to believe in themselves and bring this world-changing technology, to a global scale, then by default, the GDP would go up. So that was a huge project I had the privilege of working on. The world's first platform for ending video game addiction. I'm working with a client now who wants to drastically diminish trauma worldwide over the next 20 years. I'm working with someone who wants to end, and when I say end, I mean like completely end, dementia over the next 15 years.
Wow.
So these are some of the projects that I either have worked on or am currently working on.
So working with these kinds of entrepreneurs, ones that have, brilliance and big visions and geniuses that, obviously a lot of different areas there. What are some of the common problems that they face in creating that vision and implementing that vision? What are some of the common problems that you see? And as a transformational coach in this field, what are some of, you don't have to disclose proprietary processes, but how do you help them bring these visions into reality?
Yeah. Well, the first question is, what are some of the common challenges that I see? And it's a combination. A lot of it, if I'm being super honest, stems from this sense, this belief of not being enough. Not being enough. What you can be, what you can do, what you can have, and what you can give are all a function, are all in direct proportion to how worthy you believe you are. And the interesting thing is, even an entrepreneur that has massive vision is not immune to this systemic challenge that we experience globally, which is this belief of I'm not enough. And yeah, so that tends to be a big one. That's a big one. And then peak performance is another one. So I, similar to yourself, have a martial arts background and an athletics background. And so I understand peak performance very well. I was one of the very early biohacking guys. So like in the very early stages of when Dave Asprey was getting into biohacking, I was getting into it myself. So understanding what causes you to perform at your peak. And understanding human potentiality, that kind of like that book, Living with Seal, where Jesse hired Goggins to essentially coach him. What he discovered was that when you're at about 30 to 40% of your capacity, that's when your brain tells you that you're done. And you still have, all that extra percent left in the tank to go. So it's really not, it's a capacity game, but a capacity game of understanding what your capacity really is. Because obviously the bigger of a game you want to play as an entrepreneur, the bigger capacity that takes. Think about a guy like Elon. He's got Tesla, he's got SpaceX, he's got Boring Company, he's got Neuralink, et cetera, et cetera. Most entrepreneurs can barely make it through one business and still come out alive. And yet Elon is doing all of those. How does he do that? Well, it's because he's figured out how to increase his capacity. And it has more to do with, it's not a physical battery that he figured out how to make bigger. It's a mindset. He figured out how to optimize more of his pre-existing capacity. So yeah, belief systems and capacity tend to be some of the major contributors to the game.
So how do you bring these things to light with the client? Because obviously a lot of these internal programming systems have been acquired generationally. A lot of them are unconscious.
Yep.
They are, in my experience, really what shape the whole processing direction for a person's emotions, their thought patterns, the whole thing. It really, like you're saying, it massively impacts their potentiality. How do you discover what those belief systems are? Excuse me. How do you discover what they are? And then when you uncover one that you can name, like I'm not enough or whatever the name is, how do you go about reframing it or changing it?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's really three steps. There's three steps. The first is clarity or awareness. Awareness is probably a better word. Awareness of, oh, I have this belief that I'm not enough. Very often the behavior is the last thing in the chain. So usually your identity or your belief system is at the top. Your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, and your results are near the bottom. And so people typically, because it's what they can be aware of within their own perspective, is their behavior and their results. So they look at their results, they look at their behavior, and they don't like them. But very rarely can they walk that back far enough to get a macro view of their belief systems or their identity. And that is the value of a coach. A coach is there to be able to look over your shoulder and point out the things that you can't see. And so we illuminate the things that they're not aware of, the belief systems and the identities that are not serving them. And then we basically say, well, those will not be useful moving forward. But then we reverse engineer, well, what is? So if we think about like, if someone wants to be a triathlete, there's a certain result. Let's say they want to win an Ironman. There's a very particular mindset that would be required in order to do that. And it probably wouldn't just be one mindset. It would be a number of things. It would have to do with their belief in themselves, their belief in what's possible, et cetera, et cetera. And so we would reverse engineer based on the end result. I want to create this level of impact in the world. Okay, what version of you or who would you need to be in order to create that? And to drill down to the most or to the highest level of clarity about who that person is. Well, what would that person have to believe? What type of identity would that person have to have? And again, just like uncover the layers of that until you got to the absolute totality of what that is. And then once you have clarity about that, that brings us to the third pillar, which is the pillar of decision. And, as the Greeks would say, decision is to cut away, essentially to burn the boats. Most people treat decisions these days as kind of wishy-washy, like you can make a decision to get married and then you can not be married and then you can get married again and not get married. And like back in the day, if you got married, that was it. And so I think people forget, especially where our culture is today, we forget there's great power that comes with real, true decision. I call it the gravity of decision. Like when you make a real decision, as Tony Robbins would say, it's a line in the cement, not in the sand. Mm-hmm. And so it's about getting people to, everyone can do that. Everyone can do that. And the reason that I know that is because in the medical world, there's this phenomenon called cold turkey, quitting cold turkey. You can smoke cigarettes for 25 years and then one day, in an instant, decide to quit, and not just decide to quit, but never smoke ever again. And there's no patch and there's no gum and there's no group and there's no nothing. You just quit. And cold turkey, in fact, is one of the most powerful, highest success rate ways to quit smoking and or anything else. Why? because in the moment of decision, there's so much gravity that the neural network literally repatterns itself in that moment. Just like when something traumatic happens to someone, like a car accident or an attack or something like that, in that moment, literally to protect itself, the brain rewires itself in that moment. I've seen it on a PET scan. I've seen it literally happen. It's unbelievable. And so it is the gravity of decision that is the most important. Case in point, January 1st, what happens to gym memberships?
They go through the roof.
60 to 90 days later, what happens?
They drop off, cancellations,
Why?
excuses.
Because January 1st, they made a decision, but they didn't make a decision, right? That's the difference. So when I work with my clients, once we've determined what the mindset, what the identity is, we make a decision to be that person. And then from there, there's no going back.
So a lot of that neurological change, like you're describing, really does require a peak state. It's a very different state of being than just sitting down logically saying, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. Like the physiology, the state that a person would need to be in. How do you induce that state, or how do you help your clients get into that state to then make that kind of powerful transformation?
It's a fantastic question. Human beings ultimately are only motivated out of two things: pain and pleasure. And when someone makes a cold turkey decision, there is almost always some pain involved. And sometimes there's some pleasure involved, but most of the time there's pain.
Yeah.
And what most people don't realize is that they walk around with a lot of pain. But the way that we orchestrate our civilization currently is that we're kind of okay with lying to ourselves and to each other about the pain that we have. And it's sad, but most people are in relationships they're not happy with. Most people live in a body that they're not happy with. Most people go to a job every day that they're not happy with. I could stop right there, and that's pretty bad. I could keep going. I've probably got 2 or 3 more things that I could say that, right? That's the majority of the population. But if you sat them down, or if something happened one day, like every now and then, and it happens on a regular basis, every now and then somebody wakes up and they look at the person they're in a relationship with and they say, this isn't working. Or they go to their boss and they say, you know what, I quit, because something happens. Something that happens is one day, for whatever reason, they reach a level of pain where they say, what is it costing me to be here? And what is it going to continue to cost me to be here? And they sober up to that reality and they go, fuck, I'm not willing to pay this price anymore. And they draw the line and they walk away, or they walk towards something new and better. So it's about getting them to sober up to the true cost of continuing to stay as they are.
Beautiful. Now, so that's a threshold, like that capacity that you're bringing them to. You're bringing them to like the edge, and there's like a leap in that they reach whether you would say it, enough's enough, or the line in the concrete, however you're describing that. That is a threshold that they would be leaping into, essentially a new identity or an unknown. There's often in those moments massive physiological effects, like people are shaking, like it's quite impactful.
Yeah.
But I was just going to speak into that threshold dynamic, and you sort of mentioned this before. I've also found that the inverse is also true, in that people have a tolerance for joy and love and connection. And when too much joy or too much connection is there, they stop it. and
Yeah.
they sedate from
Mhm.
the joy. Obviously, it's a different sort of problem. But what I've found working, and I'm sure you probably have many similar experience working with elite entrepreneurs, is that as much as changing the bottom threshold or getting them to that decision-making point, then doing the inverse for how good can they tolerate it.
Yep.
Can you speak into that? Like, how do you
Yep.
reset
So
that level?
totally. What you're talking about, the context that I give what you're talking about is what I call the emotional bandwidth.
Yep.
So imagine a line here and a line here, a line here and a line here. Most people exist in a wave somewhere within that bandwidth. And it's not terrible and it's not amazing. It's just kind of okay. No one wants to feel really, really bad, and no one wants to feel really, really good. Some people are not even aware of how good they can feel. And so you have to kind of reintroduce them to that. And it's like working out. If you've been following me for a while, or not even a while, you've probably seen some of the pictures I've posted of kind of the before and after of my workout experience. I was 155 or so, and today I sit at about 200. So how did I do that? Well, obviously I didn't do it overnight. I did it over the course of, close to 4 years. So when I'm introducing people to new levels of their emotional bandwidth, it's about slowly but surely widening the aperture for emotional tolerance. Because you're right, if you give them the fire hose right off the bat, it's too much. So slowly but surely over time, every day, every week, I give them challenges to push that emotional bandwidth a little bit so they get used to more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And not only more and more and more, but how long can you handle it? Right? Anyone can get in an ice bath for 30 seconds, but how many people can stay in for 20 minutes? It's a different story.
Yeah.
Right? So not just how much, but how long.
Yeah.
How long? The real masters that I know from studying martial arts back in the day, like the Zen masters, they one of them was interviewed once, and the guy said, well, how long do you meditate every day? And you could just look at this guy and he was just in total peace. And he said, about 24 hours. And the guy goes, obviously that can't be true. And he goes, of course it's true, because in every moment I'm at peace. I don't have to sit down with some incense and a pad and a thing to be at peace. I can just always be at peace. And so talk about like not just how much, but how long, right? So those are really the conditions of like continuing to push people to new heights. And then how long can you maintain that? How long can you hold that? That's really the secret.
Yeah. And so, working with entrepreneurs that are doing really big things, and actually, before I'll talk into that, I've just, Michael's on the call. Michael's comment here: I did that exact thing to quit smoking 20 years ago, cold turkey, and never touched one. The pain was guilt and shame when my 4-year-old son was saying to me one day, "Daddy, will you die because you smoke?" Wow.
That'll do it.
That's powerful. Emotional impact was enough to rewire my brain in the moment. Enjoying this. Thank you. Great comment, yep. Michael.
Fantastic. Michael. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for choosing to live in an excellent way.
Awesome. Michael's a brilliant transformation coach, and you two would get along really well, cool. I would imagine. So, and I've totally lost my train of thought. So the entrepreneurial dynamic where you're talking about tolerance, there is
Yeah.
a huge burnout for
Hmm.
entrepreneurs.
Sure.
And how do you, sort of approach preparing an entrepreneur for the long game, for
Yeah.
first of all, physically,
Yep.
and then speak into that, and then I'd like to sort of start to talk about legacy. But how do you help an entrepreneur avoid burnout
Yeah.
while they're bringing their vision?
Sure.
Because the struggle's real when you're operating in high bandwidths for a long
Yeah.
period of time. It's like
Yep.
it's a real thing.
Yep. So the answer to that is two parts. Number one is just conditioning. Conditioning. The best boxers in the world can go 12 rounds and stay on their feet and keep their hands up the whole time.
Mm.
That's incredible. If you know anything about cardiovascular fitness, not only are they on their toes the whole time moving, not only do they have their hands up the whole time, they're throwing punches and they're taking punches.
Yeah.
And they can do that for 12 rounds. That's impressive. That's impressive. So how do they get there? Well, obviously it's conditioning. They didn't start like that, right? So I put all of my people on some type of training regimen so that they can develop their capacity. It usually has to do with some type of high intensity, training. It's a little different for everyone, but there's some type of literal, actual physical training involved. Then there's the mental side, which is you can go further than you think you can, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then we turn a corner into a new and different realm, which is the realm of the magician.
Mm.
One of my first mentors was an amazing guy named Kevin Nations.
Yeah.
And he talks about this concept of the mule and the magician. And the mule's value comes from its ability to move something from one point to another. It takes the sand from the bottom of the hill and brings it to the top of the hill. So its value ultimately is based on time, how long it takes to do that, how many trips can the mule make in a day, that's kind of its utility. Now you have a magician. Let's assume that magic is real. And I don't mean just like magic like David Blaine, but I mean like real Merlin type magic. And let's assume that I am a magician and that I can turn lead into gold. And you, Jeremy, bring your dump truck to my house full of lead. And you say, okay, Shan man, I want you to turn it into gold. And I say, okay. And I take my hand and I go, abracadabra. And the lead literally turns into gold. How long did it take me to do that? Maybe 2 or 3 seconds. How much is it worth? I don't know. How much is a dump truck worth of gold? A lot. So the magician creates from magic, not from hustle, not from grind. There's even exercise machines today that you use for, I believe it's like 8 minutes, and you get a complete full body workout. And I know guys who use this machine and they're ripped. They're ripped. 8 minutes and that's it. I'm in the gym usually for an hour. 8 minutes. So there's this concept, and this ties a little bit into human potentiality, right? Which is like there's whispers of ancient advanced civilizations that could create at will. Entire cities could be spoken into existence just like that. Abracadabra. Do you know what that means?
As I speak, so shall it be.
With my word, I
word.
create.
Yeah.
With my word, I create. If you think about the implications of what that really means, it's pretty profound. Now, the way that we create things these days is mostly based on hustle. How much hustle can I put into it? Well, what are we completely negating in those moments? Our ability to speak magic into existence. And yet that's something that our ancient advanced ancestors did all the time. And so that's something that I'm pushing all of my people to get back to, is what if you could create more with less?
Mm.
So I'm about both. I'm about, yeah, let's bust your ass in the gym for an hour, and let's figure out how to say abracadabra a little more, if you get what I'm saying. So it's a combination of both. It's as I like to say, the small hinge that swings the big door, and it's the ability to go 12 rounds and keep your hands up the whole time. It's both.
So this magic that you speak of, that I'm deeply curious about ancient civilizations and lost knowledge, and I truly believe that there was wisdom keepers throughout our ages that had an understanding of what you're speaking of here, the power of the word and the connection of that soul connection to what you're saying, being able to alchemize or manifest from whatever unseen realms into the physical realm. What kind of connection do you see between our modern lack of capacity to decide that you were talking about before, that wishy-washy, I'll do this and 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and that ability to make magic by saying this is what it's going to be? And is there a correlation there?
I think, if I'm really honest, there is a correlation there. And I think if there was a correlation, or the correlation that I can see that is the most unobvious to me and yet the most profound, is that it's not our mediocrity or our darkness that we're most afraid of. It's our light. It's our power. And we can prove that very simply by looking at what I demonstrated, which is most people are in a relationship they don't want to be in a job, in a body, in a blah, 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 blah. So if it was mediocrity we were really afraid of, the majority of the world would not exist the way that it does. It's our power. Someone is very willing to hustle and grind in order to have something, in order to achieve something, because we have this narrative about what the equation of achievement has to look like, rather than to desire something and to simply say abracadabra and to have it. That would demonstrate a very high level of power. That would completely depart from this idea that our value is determined by our time or our sweat or our performance, none of which are accurate, by the way. So it would cause us to bump up against the godliness within us. And there would be a level of ownership and responsibility that would come with that. And we all secretly know it. To some degree, we all secretly know it. And we do a very good job of being distracted by it, so much so that we almost forget about it.
Beautiful. So
how's that?
That's awesome. So this capacity you're talking about before for entrepreneurs to give, to have, to receive, and that sense of worthiness, that I can see is intimately tied in with this dynamic.
Huge. That's a fantastic deduction, because you're completely correct.
So working with these types of entrepreneurs, I know you've got a number of different programs and working with you at different levels. I think you've got like and again, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got a coaching program that I think you're charging around $150,000 US. But you're very clear in saying that the returns are infinite. Can you speak? Yeah. Can you speak into this dynamic of an infinite return? Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's multidimensional. ROI in my world stands for ripple of impact.
Mm.
And it's multidimensional. And what I mean by that is that there are two ROIs, and meaning just return on investment, which is when an individual invests with me, we determine before we get started together what the most ultimate return on their investment would be. So if I said, Jeremy, you're going to give me 150,000, I want you and I together will determine what the ultimate return on investment will be for you. And then we'll more than likely blow that out of the water. How does that sound? Like, we'll not just hit it, we'll surpass it. Well, that's a pretty good deal for you, but that's just the first stop on the journey. The second is I have a dear friend whose name is Jules, and she has this concept of 100 years of impact. And all of the work I do revolves around civilization design. At the end of the day, I'm a coach by necessity. I am a civilization engineer by choice, I guess, by whatever. And so whenever I work on a project, I look at the ROI, meaning the ripple of impact. Can I see the benefit to humanity existing long after the person that I'm working with is gone? Even if that person, based on the way that technology and science is moving, and consciousness, I easily believe that people will live to 150 to 200 years old. Even if that's true, after they die, will the impact of their project not only continue to go on, but get better? That's the real question. How does the impact not only continue on, but get better over time? And if I can clearly illustrate how that's going to happen to someone, now they not only have the return on investment that they will get, they are clear about the ripple of impact that our work will make long after they're gone. And when you combine the value of those two things, 150,000 is like a drop in the bucket.
Awesome. So looking at that big picture view from like that ripple effect and contemplating the dynamic of what our civilization will be, could you just speak into what some of the common narratives are without going down necessarily conspiracy theory? What do you think some of the problems are with our current civilization? And what are your thoughts on how we can, as empowered, awakened entrepreneurs, what can we do about it, about changing that? So what do you see as the current sort of problems and opportunities, and
yeah,
what can we do?
Well, if I'm totally, there's two problems. There's two problems. There is the problem that's in our face, and then there's the problem that no one is aware of. That's bigger. That's the bigger problem. So the problem that's in our face is that the way that we conduct ourselves is ultimately unsustainable. And I mean that essentially across the board, because really how you do one thing is how you do all things. And so let's take energy, for example. The way we currently play the energy game is not sustainable. There eventually, if we continue to play, if we didn't make any innovation, if we ended all new innovation today and we just had to play the energy game the way that we're playing it right now for the rest of time, we would exhaust our resources and run out of energy in a relatively short amount of time. So that's not sustainable.
That's not, yeah.
But that's a metaphor. That's a metaphor for how we do life. Look at how the biggest reason that people die, especially in the United States, is heart disease. Well, where do you think that heart disease comes from? Do you think it's not congenitive, it's lifestyle. So what does that mean? What that means is their lifestyle is not sustainable. Most people could easily live to 100 years old without CRISPR technology or without NAD or without, nanotechnology or any of this cutting edge stuff. Just naturally, most people could live to easily 100 years old if they took care of themselves in a way that was truly sustainable. We don't do that. We don't do that. And so how we do energy is how we do our body, is how we do machinery, is how we do, etc. It goes on. And so that is the problem that's in our face. That is the one that's very real, that's causing major problems, because currently, at the most macro level, we are extracting resources from the planet faster than the planet can replenish them. That's a problem. Just like we're doing more damage to our body than our body has time to recover from. That's a problem. So these are very real problems that are in our face today. But there's a bigger problem. And this is the one that no one talks about. The biggest problem is how we think about problems. Einstein said, you can't solve your problems with the same level of thinking that created them. And so the problem with how we think is that we start with problems. That's a fundamental flaw. Because whenever you solve a problem, it pre-assumes that there's a problem in the first place. And because it pre-assumes there's a problem, the seed, this is deep, the seed of the solution to that problem brings with it at least 1 to 2 more problems because of the genesis of the thing. As I like to say, the genesis of the thing is what maintains the thing. Why do you think we live in a reality where we're solving problems and either we haven't found the solution to those problems or we find the solution and then that solution creates more problems? Look at cell phones, for example. Cell phones have solved a lot of problems. Global connectivity, you and I talking right now, that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, it's awesome.
How much waste gets created from cell phones? A lot. How much resources is extracted from the earth to create cell phones? And I'll answer the question for you. An unsustainable amount. An unsustainable amount of waste and an unsustainable amount of resources being extracted from the planet, which means any solution that is not self-sustaining is by default self-terminating. I'll say that again. Any solution that is not self-sustaining is by default self-terminating. And so what happens is we have a mode of thinking of, we have a problem. That's the problem. The problem is we have a problem and we create a solution for the problem. We have all these creative, amazing people around the world that should be connected. Well, let's create the cell phone. That's great. That's a solution. Well, what has that solution created? More problems.
More problems.
Now we have to create solutions for those problems. So is that really a solution? It's not really a solution. It solved one solution, but it created other problems. A real solution is what I call an end-to-end solution. And the cure for that is not to solve problems. It is to create, period. Not solutions. Solution implies problem. Just to create for the sake of creating. If you create solutions with a problem in mind, whether you like it or not, your solution will bring with it the seeds of more problems. and you perpetuate having to solve more problems. And you'll never, ever, ever, never, ever reach the totality of what society or civilization can be, because you'll be so busy solving problems that you'll never get to the level that's above that, which is to create something that is a closed loop of just creation. It's a very different world.
Beautiful.
That is what I'm desperately moving the world towards.
How would you say that correlates to art? Like, we have this idea of science in understanding small things and the way things work, and problem solution or action reaction. How does that compare to, say, people bringing out their inner creativity, genius as an art form, whatever form that takes? Is there a parallel there?
100%. Art is creation in its most pure form, because there's no agenda for it. It's not designed to solve anything. It's not even designed to make you feel anything. It's designed to be an echo of what that person was feeling in the moment when they created it. And whatever you end up feeling like when you experience that art, is the artist knows that you may have a completely different experience of the art, and they're okay with that. That's called love. The highest expression of love is unconditional, meaning it's like Kanye West. Whether you love his music or you hate his music, he's good with that. He's completely at peace if you hate his music, because at least you get to feel something.
Yeah.
And he's okay with you feeling hate if you feel something. That's what your interpretation of his art is. He's not going to try to control or manipulate you into feeling something that's not your authentic experience of what's happening. That's the beauty that an artist gives to the people who receive their art, is the unconditional acceptance of you may experience anything, and I'm okay with that.
Michael's put in a comment in the chat here. The magician always works from a place of, what do I wish to create, instead of what do I need to fix?
Right. Exactly right. Or as I like to say, desire is expansion seeking to express itself. You've probably heard me say that before.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, it's really true. Desire is expansion seeking to express itself. And really, that's what art is. It's just the bigness in us wanting to come out. Now, I have a much more broad definition of what art is, because I believe it's anything that is the peak of your expression. So that, in my world, that relates to global impact.
Yeah.
It's not just, music or literal paintings or things like that. It's global impact. But metaphorically, they're the same.
Amazing. Now, you've got a number of projects on at the moment. What can you tell me about Second Summit?
Well, Second Summit is Second Summit was designed by an observation. And in full transparency, it was designed to solve a problem, which maybe is a little hypocritical, but I'm okay with that. Because sometimes you have to solve a problem before you can create purely from the creation. Kind of like we have to solve the energy thing before we can do anything beyond that. So over the last maybe 5 years, I've had a number of conversations with a very unique type of person. They are high net worth or ultra high net worth individuals who have exited companies, typically tech companies. They've taken the traditional kind of 2 to 3 years off. They've bought all the toys, they've done all the things, And they wake up one day and two things are abundantly clear to them. Number one, they're fundamentally not fulfilled. And Tony Robbins would call that the ultimate failure, when you get everything in life that you thought was going to do it and it doesn't do it. So they realize they have not mastered the art of fulfillment. They used the science of achievement as a vehicle to hopefully get them to the destination of fulfillment, and it never works. So that's a rude awakening. And the other side of it, and remember, this is like a niche within a niche within a niche. This is not all exited high net worth individuals. This is just a very particular group of them. But some of them wake up one day and they realize that even though financially they could be retired or more or less done, that they're not done. And in fact, not only are they not done, they have this calling to create impact in a bigger and better way than they ever have before. They don't want to do the traditional stuff that most exited people do, which is like sit on a bunch of boards, invest in some startups, do a little philanthropy, blah, blah, blah. They want to create an opus. And I am uniquely qualified to help them with both of those things, the art of fulfillment and what I would call legacy architecture. And so I've designed a program specifically for them to work with them on both of those things. And I'm calling it Second Summit.
Beautiful. How does one make these connections with these types of people? Like you've obviously been, I mean, you've been coaching for a very long time, and you're connected to many of the elite within the elite of the coaching world. How are you making these connections?
It's twofold, really. The simple answer is, everyone is human at the end of the day. Even really elite people, they're still human at the end of the day, even though their public perception may be that they're superhuman. Like a lot of people think Elon is an alien, which, maybe. But truthfully, they're human at the end of the day. And they all do human things. Like they all have a need to connect with other people. Now, many of the highest achieving people I know are like myself. They are self-admitted card-carrying introverts. So they're not out and about all that much, but they do have a need for human connection. And so I simply insert myself into environments where they hang out. That's part one. But part two is a little more nuanced than that. Back in the day, my grandfather used to say, it's not what you know, it's
who you know. Yeah.
There's a flaw in that thinking. Because it's not just who you know. It's who you are when you meet who you need to know. Let's say that you were at a networking event and I came up to you, but I was like kind of a douchebag. How far do you think our relationship would go?
Not too far.
Not very far. So I might know you, but who I am in that equation matters. And as I like to say, it's not, you don't create what you want, you create what you are. So yes, it's about inserting yourself into the right atmospheres, but it's important to be the right person when you arrive. That's the trickier part. Anyone can spend the money and get themselves into a room of, billionaires, multimillionaires, power players, whatever. But you've got to be the kind of person that resonates at such a level that they are actually magnetized to you. even if financially you're not a billionaire or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a different game. But that's how I do it.
Beautiful. So we're reaching, like, we've been speaking now for an hour. It's gone very, very quickly, and I'm deeply appreciative, but also conscious of your time. The replay of this will be going into the Awakened Entrepreneur group, and also clips will be going onto YouTube and to other networks that I'm a part of, many of which are there's many members in this group, people online now that are coaches, consultants. There's some, very, very successful entrepreneurs that are part of the entrepreneur group. If someone wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
The best way these days is to just reach out to me on Facebook.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, in wrapping this up, is there any final sort of thoughts that you would wish to convey to our entrepreneurial and forward-thinking listeners? Is there any final thoughts?
Yeah. What I like to share with my clients that I'll share with you guys is, if you know how you're going to achieve your goals, you're not thinking big enough.
I love it. That's beautiful. Well, Shannon Graham, thank you very much for your time today, speaking with us. And
thank you, Jeremy.
I'll definitely be looking forward to connecting with you again in the future. And I deeply appreciate your wisdom and your insight today. And this has been awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for those of you who joined us on the call today.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.